Good evening and welcome to the Press Box. My name is Melissa Ponzio. For the next 30 minutes, I'll be your host. With me, as always, Ty and Jay. How you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Doing good.
Okay, well, let's start things off with the pennant race. And what exactly was the turning point to make the Braves in the first place?
Well, first of all, there was the obvious acquisition of Fred McGriff that immediately added a lot of offense to really, I think, a punch and Judy offense during the beginning and the middle of the season, Jay. But then I think the other thing that you have to look at is that even though you had Fred McGriff in this lineup and this team was playing so well all of a sudden, they really weren't catching ground on the Giants. And I think the real key here was finally San Francisco had a few things catch up with them. They had some mediocre players having career years. A few injuries kicked in. And San Francisco finally started having some losing streaks, starting with the series with the Braves.
Yeah, I think that it could correlate with putting Otis Nixon in the lineup, too. When he started playing, they started playing better defense. Pitching got better because they knew he could run down anything out in the center. And then the pitcher can keep the ball more in the middle of the plate. Also, with the addition of McGriff, like Ty said, it just made everybody in the order drop down a notch. Instead of having Pendleton bat third, he got to bat sixth. Well, Pendleton's a pretty good sixth hitter. He isn't up there with the third hitters in the league. Yeah. But see, it just made the order just altogether different by adding
pressure
McGriff.
off.
Oh, yeah. Everybody relax and hit the ball.
All right. Good. Well, let's talk about Dion. And will he crack?
Well, you know, Jay, I wanted to just jump in and start arguing with you right away. Here it is. I knew you were going to start with this Otis Nixon thing immediately. Otis Nixon has been in that lineup every game. And as far as I'm concerned, Bobby Cox is not going to change anything. He wants to keep everything the same. This team's playing well. He doesn't want to make any changes. You don't want to create any controversy. You just want to keep winning, which is what they're doing. And I would do the same thing. However, Dion is going to get back in that lineup sooner or later. I mean, this guy averages scoring a run every 6.5 at bats. Otis is once every 7.2 at bats. So you got a little bit better of a ratio there for scoring runs, which is what a leadoff hitter needs to do. Dion right now is batting. Jay, Dion is batting 400 with men in scoring position.
Okay, but what wins the division for these teams? Pitching and defense. Braves got pitching. When they put Nixon in there, they got defense.
No, I think Dion's a very good defensive player. I don't think you're giving him enough credit.
Okay, well, we have a phone call. Hi, caller, you're on the air.
Hi.
Hi.
I'd like to switch subjects for a minute and talk about the Falcons and get these guys' opinion on who they think should be the starting quarterback this coming weekend.
Okay, guys, really quick.
I would go with Chris Miller, to be honest with you. I went to the game against New Orleans, and I mean, Chris Miller really had a bad game. It just seemed like the Saints' defense really confused him, and that's understandable seeing what they did to Houston the week before. That's a good defensive club. I think Hebert had a little success, but then I think he may be a little more familiar with the players over there in New Orleans since he played there, and may be a little more familiar with their defenses and knows some of the weaknesses in the New Orleans secondary.
Well, I think I'd go with Bobby Hebert. He's the hot hand, and speaking of knowing defenses, they're playing the Niners this week, and Hebert should be fairly familiar with the Niners' defense. Plus, you're right, Miller had a bad game, but I think that the whole team played better when Hebert was in there. They seem to be more confident. I don't know what it is in the huddle, but Miller just doesn't command the leadership that another quarterback does. Don't get me wrong, Miller's a good quarterback, but I think Hebert has the hot hand.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for calling, and we'll get back to the Falcons a little bit later in the program, but let's go on with the Braves. Not with the Braves necessarily, but who do you think will win National League MVP?
You know, when you sit there and look at that, along the whole season, everyone's saying Barry Bonds, Jay. And now with the Braves making this big comeback, you can look at a lot of Braves players. You can look, there's Justice. Well, there's even Fred McGriff that you can look at. There's Ronnie Gant, maybe even a starting pitcher like Tom Glavine or Greg Maddux. But I think it's still going to be Bonds. I think the Braves have so many good players that there may be a lot of votes spread out between several of those players. I think Barry Bonds is going to get a whole lot of votes from the other areas of the country up in the north and out west. I think he'll get it.
I think it'll be Len Dykstra. I think that he's led the Phillies all along. They didn't collapse like the Giants did. Dykstra comes through in the clutch. Bonds, he's a good player. He's got good stats, but he just fails. When the division was on the line, he looked miserable to me.
What about David Justice?
David Justice, I'm telling you, Fred McGriff being in that lineup has really helped him out so much. It always seems that there's men on base, and now he's got something like 106 RBIs. Justice, I mean, if you pick him, that's a good pick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
plain and simple.
Except he doesn't have a high enough average to command the voting from other parts of the country. And obviously, the South those sports writers will vote for somebody like Justice.
I like the bringing up of Lenny Dykstra. That is an excellent ball player. No one really looks at statistics such as runs scored, but he's got over 130 runs scored. No one else is close.
Okay, well, if the Braves do beat the Giants out for the division, doesn't the MVP usually come from that team?
A lot of times
The
it
winning
does, but I think Barry Bonds has done so much for his team. I mean, this was a team that was down there in the cellar last year, and here it is. Bonds comes around, and it just seems to be such a great pickup for everyone on the team that I think he really helped out his club more than anybody.
Jay?
I still think Dykstra, like you said, he might score a run a game. That's almost unheard of in modern baseball. He's on pace to score 155, something like that. So I just think that the Phillies not folding like the Giants will be in the minds of most sports writers when they go to make that vote.
All right.
But it won't be a pitcher. You mentioned Tom Glavine. I think those days are over because they get the Cy Young Award, and people are hesitant to vote for a pitcher as MVP because they have their separate awards.
I agree with that. I wouldn't pick a pitcher in that either, but like I said, there's some guys out there who have votes, and you do see them pick pitchers sometime.
Okay. Well, for our audience, this is a live show, and if you'd like to call in, the number here is 873-6713. Okay, let's move on into the Giants. Do you think they'll have a new first baseman next year?
That's a really good question, and if I'm Dusty Baker, I'm talking to that management, trying to do anything I can to keep Will Clark around. He's in the last year of his contract, and he is not having that Will Clark typical year. This is a guy that's going to be able to, I think, go out on the market and be paid $4 or $5 million a year and get a multi-year contract. There's teams such as New York who I think have expressed interest already, and a team that I really think is going to go after him hard is Baltimore. I mean, you look at Baltimore right now, and really I just don't think that they have a first baseman. Glenn Davis was a big bust for him from that trade with Houston a couple of years ago, and if they could get a big bat in there like Will Clark that can pull some balls right down that short right field porch over there at Camden Yard, I think that would really help them in the American League East.
I think it'll either be the Orioles or the Giants that get Clark. I don't know if the Giants will re-sign him or not. I think that part of Will Clark's problem this year is his ego. He has a tremendous ego, and it just clashed with Barry Bonds. And they said that they were going to show everybody they could get along and all, but they're not even talking in the clubhouse. It's like, okay, well, it may be time for him to move on because they've committed Bonds for a number of years. They haven't committed to Clark yet.
One team that I'd like to look at make a move in the offseason is Cleveland. I would like to see Cleveland try and come after a player like Will Clark to put him with a guy like Barriaga and Bell. Already, those two guys have over 100 RBIs already. An addition like Clark into that lineup would give them, I think, 3 100 RBI people. Cleveland's team ERA is around 4.6, 4.7. They would have to go out and spend the bucks, I think, on a pitcher as well. You can't just do one without the other. I think you would have to do both. If they made a move like that, I think they could really put themselves in a really good position as well.
Although the last time Cleveland went off after a National League first baseman was Keith Hernandez, and you know how that turned out.
Well, everyone knew he was washed up, too.
Yeah, but they may be a little leery of coming after a National League player like that.
No, I think they'll have the money. I think that with the new facility they're going to have, I think they're going to have a lot more people coming out to the games this year. I think they'll have more money.
Do you foresee any changes with the Braves?
I think the Braves are going to make a couple of changes. I think they're going to try and get rid of some salary so they can keep Fred McGriff. Unfortunately, I think Jay's man, Otis Nixon, is not going to be back. I think a player like Greg Olson will not be back. And Bobby Cox and John Sherholtz are going to do what they can with that team to get some of the high salaries out of there that they can. Sid Bream, I think, is another one that'll be gone. So they can have Fred McGriff around. And then some of the other players, the young players, are getting some tenure, and you're going to have to really start paying them the big money. So, yeah, they're going to have to make a few changes.
Jay?
Yeah, obviously the Braves changed their team this year, made it better. They won, 97 games last year, 98, something like that. Now they're going to win 102, something like that. So every year, if you want to stay on top, you got to change for the better. You stay the same, somebody's going to catch you.
Do you think they'll trade Gant for Klesko?
Nah. No, I don't think they'll. I don't think Gant's showing that he can have an MVP year. I think he hit a grand slam tonight, and now he's almost on the RBI lead. He's up in the home run leaders. He's hitting in the high 200s. I don't see Gant leaving. Last year he had a disappointing second half, and that's how Sanders cracked the lineup in the World Series. But see, Nixon and Gant and Justice are playing fine ball, so I don't see where you're going to make any outfield changes.
Ty?
Well, we had that question last season on the show at the beginning of the year. And again, I'm going to stay consistent. I didn't want to trade Ronnie Gant then. I don't want to trade him now. To me, what's wrong with having 3 guys that can hit 30 home runs? And I like the fact that he can possibly steal you 30 bases in a year. No, I wouldn't trade him. I'd let him go out there and keep slugging home runs like he is with the 2 other guys.
But a question to remember is, can we pay 3 of those guys their salary? But we do have a phone call. Hi, caller, you're on the air. Oh, I'm sorry. You can answer that question now because our caller is hung up.
Well, I will answer that question. I have faith in John Sherholtz and being able to maintain a budget and financially handling this baseball team. There's no doubt in my mind I think they'll be able to pay him. They've been thinking about that for a long time. Ronnie Gann, I think, is in their future.
Well, I think maybe if there's a money crunch, Turner could sell a Cartoon Network and pay one of these players more money.
There you go. Okay, let's turn our focus to the American League. And does anyone want to win the AL East?
That's a good question. At the beginning of the year, I thought Toronto and New York would be the teams fighting out for this, and they are. And then somehow Baltimore was really struggling, and now they let those guys just get on a little bit of a hot streak, and now Baltimore is right in the middle of this thing. I think what it's going to come down to is that you're this late in the season, you've gone down to a 4-man rotation. Each team has 3 pretty good starting pitchers that they hope to get wins from. And I think the team that gets the best production from those 1, 2, and 3 starters are going to come through. I'm really wary about the New York starters. They have not had good seasons. Abbott's been disappointing despite his no-hitter this year. But the hitting that they had, the Yankees are batting over 280 as a team. So that's why I still count them a legitimate shot here, despite having the worst pitching out of those 3 teams.
Well, I think the Giants proved that high batting averages don't win divisions. So
Doing it in the clutch does.
I think that Baltimore has the best pitching. So as I just said earlier in the show, pitching and defense wins the division. So I think Baltimore. Also, if you look at their schedule, they get to play Baltimore plays Toronto last 3 games of the year, or 3 of the last 6 games of the year. And if they stay within a game, they'll have a shot at them. Toronto's pitching. I mean, how can you throw Jack Morris and Dave Stewart at these guys time and time again? Those guys, they look like they're pitching batting practice to me.
Okay, well, we have a phone call. Hi, caller, you're on the air.
Hey, how you doing?
Just fine. How are you?
Fine, great.
Great.
I agree with you guys. On the Braves, I think we got to bring some of the young players up. And another one, I think Terry Pillington's probably going to be gone, too. Got to find room for their Chipper Jones.
Okay.
And even if they don't sign McGriff, they still going to keep Klesko in the pitch. Don't you think so?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Klesko's been moved to the outfield. He's practicing in the outfield, and I think they're going to have him as the 5th outfielder and the left-handed pinch hitter, the role that Sid Bream is playing off the bench. But as far as who was the other guy you mentioned?
McGriff.
Well, no, Pendleton.
Pendleton,
Right.
yeah. I think that there was an article in the paper a week ago said that when they brought Chipper Jones up, they were going to make him learn all 3 infield positions, second, short, and third, the middle infield and third. And if they can get him worked in, they'll still need Pendleton next year to work with whoever they're going to move into that position, I think. So they may keep Pendleton around as a bench player and a pinch hitter. He's a switch hitter, so he'd probably be a darn good pinch hitter.
I'll go for that. I think Pendleton will stay around.
Okay.
But eventually, though, Chipper Jones will take that position.
Oh, I agree totally. Chipper Jones is playing shortstop right now in the minor leagues, and he's making a lot of throwing errors. I really think it's a lack of concentration defensively. From what I understand, he's always thinking about hitting even when he's out in the field. You put him over there at third base, obviously he's going to get fewer chances. I think that's definitely going to be his position.
Let me say that, then I'm going to get out the line. I think the Braves going to have to bring them young players up because you got to mix the younger players with the veterans, and also that's a good way to keep the salaries down.
Yep.
I mean, even though McGriff did a good job, if they decide not to sign him, they still got some insurance. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
I agree, but then Fred McGriff, I think, really wants to stay and play here.
Yeah, and he's such a nice guy, and I enjoy that guy. And anyway, I enjoy talking to you guys. Thanks a lot.
Well,
All right,
thank you
thank
very
you.
much
Thanks
for
for calling.
calling. Thanks so much. What about the American League MVP?
Well, I tell you what, there's a player that I liked all along from the beginning of the year, and he's with Chicago. I mean, with Chicago, if you look at a pitcher, you look at Blackjack McDowell. But the player that I really like is Big Frank at first base. He's going to win the title in the American League in RBIs, and he means so much to that Chicago team offensively. And I think Chicago is going to hold on and win the West.
Yeah, I'd have to say, at the All-Star break, everybody was penciling in Olrud's name for the MVP, just like they did Bonds. But Olrud has fallen off. He doesn't capture the headlines. Big Frank, when he hits the ball, he hits it 500 feet. That sticks in a sports writer's mind. So plus the RBI title, like Ty mentioned, and carrying your team to a division title, that carries some weight. So, yeah, I'd have to go. We might agree on this one. I'll say Frank Thomas, too.
What about Juan Gonzalez from Texas?
Juan Gonzalez is having a great year, but I think he's down there in that Texas, that Fort Worth market down there. You got Big Frank. He's on WGN a lot of times. He's in the big city. Chicago's a marquee team. I think that's going to make a lot of difference.
Yeah, another thing that holds Gonzalez back is he struggles with the English language, and that hurts him in interviews. He doesn't get called on for interviews. He doesn't get called on for endorsements like Frank Thomas does. So, I guess a lesson to you younger players, learn the language if you want to be MVP.
Hey, you heard it first on the press box. Learn the language.
I tell you what, though, I like the Chicago team. I like the 3 pitchers that they're going to have down the stretch along with McDowell, Fernandez, and Alvarez. I think those guys are going to be tough to beat. McDowell just had a bad outing. I don't think that's going to come up again anytime soon.
He may be burned out, though.
No.
Okay, before we go on to college football, I'd like to thank our sponsors, who are the Atlanta Knights, Sports Authority, and Hooters of Buckhead. So, college football. The Dogs are 0-2. Is Goff in the hot seat?
Oh, boy, Jay, this hurts. But if I'm running the show at Georgia, and if I'm one of the head honchos over there in Athens, you have to be considering looking at a new coach. During the Goff tenure, he's averaging giving up almost 30 points to Tennessee and Florida. If you're going to sit there and compete in this SEC East, you're going to have to beat those 2 clubs. And Ray Goff simply cannot beat these guys. It looks obvious to me. When they played against Tennessee the other night, they looked like they were getting whipped on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I mean, it didn't look it. It was obvious. Anyone could notice. They didn't have as much foot speed as Tennessee. And the kicking game, I think, is terrible. Missing 3 field goals against South Carolina, and the punting game, I just think, is terrible. And these are just ways that they're finding. This is finding ways to lose football games in a very competitive conference. And you can sit there and look at it, and, yeah, I think it's the coach's fault. He's been there 5 years. He runs things. He's got to get the personnel there. That is a great university for football. That's a great football program. Y'all, there's no excuse for getting pushed around like that.
You're right, Ty. It was a good football program. And,
It is. Still is. Don't kid yourself.
I don't know. I don't know if coaching is the problem. The Dogs just might be a little lacking on the offense and defensive lines. Usually they have your blue chip players there. I don't know if you see any this year, and I didn't see any last year, other than that big number 73 they have at offensive tackle. But Ty's right, and if the team struggles in like special teams and other aspects of the game, you definitely have to point to the coach. You have to say, hey, well, how come the guys aren't playing at their optimum level? I don't know if it's coaching, though, Ty. There's an adage, though, that says old quarterbacks don't make good coaches, and that usually proves to be true. There aren't very many good coaches in any football that used to play quarterback. I don't know why that is. I think they're just pansies or whatever. I don't know.
No, I just think that when you look at it, he's responsible for recruiting. He's responsible for figuring out a philosophy that they want to go by. And you have to sit there and develop these game plans and what you want to do. And right now, that just looks like a confused football team right now.
Okay, well, what do the Dogs need to do to get straightened out? And if it is replacing a coach, do you have any suggestions?
They need to schedule Furman, or some other Division II schools, so they can get some wins.
No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to see them do that. Georgia Tech has done that, playing Furman, and that's a win, but it doesn't count towards going towards a bowl. So they're going to have to win still 6 more games at least to qualify for a bowl game.
What about coaches? New coaches?
Coaches, I would like to see Georgia go after someone who's already been established, who's already been a head coach somewhere else. They're good enough to where it's a good enough program to where they can go out and do something like that. I would like to see have them approach a player or a person like Howard Schnellenberger at Louisville, who took a little team over there to Memphis as an 8-point underdog and won a game pretty easily up there. He's an excellent coach. He's won a national championship at Miami. Another person that I really like, who I think knows what he's doing and knows what he's talking about, is Dick Vermeil. This is a man who led the Eagles to a Super Bowl during his coaching days there, and he sees a lot of college football, obviously, covering these football games. I would also consider him as well.
Yeah, he's a workaholic. Vermeil would be good. I don't know, but it's hard to say. Some of the candidates you mentioned might not want to, like Schnellenberger might not want to leave Louisville. It's hard to say. I don't know really if they're ready to dump the coach, but I guess if they do it this week, I'd vote for Ty. He has all the answers on Georgia
Yeah,
football.
right.
I think Ty should be the coach.
I think one thing that Ray Goff really has to do is he has to look at his personnel for his defensive coaches. Every time you look at a big game, third down, fourth down, they always seem to give up the big play, the touchdown, the first down. The only time I ever saw them stop anyone was on that goal line stand at Auburn, and Auburn screwed it up. They won that by default.
Okay, well, what's going to be an incentive for a coach to leave their present position to come to Georgia?
Well, Georgia's a great program. You got a lot to gain by coming here. First of all, there's a lot of talent. There's great high school players here. Georgia can usually just go in and almost pick almost anyone they want to in this state. So you're certainly always going to have talented players there. You have a lot of tradition. You have a lot of support. You have a lot of good things to sell for your program. Not to mention, there's a lot of money there in Athens as well.
He's right. It's a national prestige program. Also, Georgia high school football, like you said, is probably a hotbed in recruiting. That in Florida, northern Florida. All the teams from around the country come and recruit here. And so, in a way, the Georgia coach has an advantage because he's already here.
Right.
And the players in the high school system in Georgia tend to make the trip to Athens before they go to any other school to look around. So it would be easier on the recruiting. But it seems to me that Georgia just recruits lately, like running backs and quarterbacks, and they need to recruit in all aspects of the game. They got a good linebacker, but he hadn't come through yet.
Well, the recruiting class of 1991 had several highly touted blue chipper offensive line prospects. There was Friedenberg out of North Cobb High. There was Chad Chosewood out of Habersham. These are pretty good. These were highly rated players in the top 10 in the paper when they were being recruited. There was Paul Taylor. Notre Dame recruited him. David Weeks. Tom Lemming said that, who's a recruiting expert up in Chicago, said that David Weeks, he felt, was the best offensive lineman of them all out of a highly regarded group of kids.
Well,
so, no, they've got the guys. Some of them just aren't panning out.
They might need a coach then, since they can't get any performance out of those blue chip players.
Okay, well, let's move on to Tech, and they play Virginia this Thursday, I believe. What can we expect from Georgia?
Well, I think that this is going to tell us a lot here. I'm going to go to that game Thursday night, and
I'm going to the Brave game.
One thing I'm going to look at is Virginia has their defensive line coming back, so they're experienced and they're solid there. I'm going to be really curious to see how Georgia Tech plays against them, especially after losing an offensive lineman in the offseason, Yancey Sims. I'll also be really interested to see how Donnie Davis performs. Donnie Davis, I sort of feel sorry for the guy. Here he is. He comes to Georgia Tech, and he was, some people had him as highly rated as Eric Zier, and after 1 year, you see a bunch of talk of Derek Stegall here, who was recruited a year later out of Noonan. I would like to see them give him a chance at least, instead of putting the pressure on him and talking about this true freshman that they have.
I went to the Furman game, and Davis did seem to throw the ball high a lot over the middle, which will get it picked off with a Division I defense. But that might be nerves. He might settle down. It's really a good barometer, I think. The only problem is having a short week, you know. They may have played a great game on Saturday and not on Thursday night, you know. The fact that it's on national TV always gives the visiting team an advantage. That takes away your home field advantage when you have it on national TV, because the other team's just as fired up because millions of people are watching them.
I think, Virginia only had a 5-day week as well because they played Navy last week. Georgia Tech played Furman, so you had two teams that had pretty soft games last week.
Okay, big SEC game, Tennessee at Florida.
This is a huge game, and I think the winner of this game is going to go to represent the eastern side of the conference over in Birmingham. I think Florida's going to win this game. Tennessee showed me a lot last week in beating up on the Dogs, but they have not won down there at Florida Field, and God knows how long. I think it's been over 20 years since they've won down there. So I don't think they're going to win down there until I see them win. And I don't think they're going to beat Alabama until I see them beat Alabama. I just won't believe it till I see it.
Well, I think Florida might win too, because obviously they were preparing for Tennessee before they played Kentucky.
They were.
So maybe they got 2 weeks worth of preparation in. I don't know what was the problem with Kentucky, but Tennessee looks good. That'll be a real good game, though. You know, toss-up. What? You know what the line is? Who's supposed to win?
It's
Florida?
even.
Yeah. See, toss-up. What'd I tell you?
Another thing about Florida is that you have your greatest improvement from your first game to your second game. This will be Tennessee's third game. I think you're going to see a a much more improved Florida team that has 10 starters coming back on offense. And their defensive linemen, I think, are really good. I really like Kevin Carter and Johnny Church.
Okay, well, let's move on to the NFL. And is there a second coach in trouble in this state?
As far as I'm concerned, if I were in charge, he would be in trouble. I don't like Glanville at all. Nothing against him personally. I just don't think he can coach defense. This team gave up 557 yards to New Orleans. That was a franchise record for them, and they just blew millions of dollars on getting personnel for their defense. Their line of scrimmage got killed. New Orleans ran on them pretty easily. They had a little letdown and let the Falcons back in the game, but when that team needs to give up the points, when the other team needs to score, they will. And the Smith family, they look at the bottom line, and they've spent all this money, and so after Jerry comes out here, and I think he's going to have a losing season. I think he's going to go something like 6-10. Yeah, they're going to look at that hard because that's going to affect ticket sales.
Jay?
Yeah, I think Glenville is in trouble because I don't think they're going to win this week. So they'll start off 0-3, and like Ty alluded to, they spent a lot of money on free agents for a win-now philosophy, and Glenville talked the upper management into this win-now philosophy, and I guess Glenville isn't scared, though, because he'd always get a job in the fashion industry, probably, if he loses his job.
There you go.
Or making motorcycle ads.
Yeah, whatever. I think he's more into that, his image and the way the media perceives him than he is on making on-field adjustments. Don't get me wrong, he's a good, I'd say great defensive coach. If he's given the talent, he can work a defense into a real stopper. But now that he's head coach, it detracts from his actual on-field ability to coach. He's so worried about his image, and I've never seen him be that successful. He wasn't successful at Houston, I don't believe, was he, Ty?
Well, he
But he
got
was
him
successful
to the
here
playoffs.
as a defensive coordinator. That's when he had his greatest success.
That he did do. One thing I wanted to add is that here it is. You have this quarterback controversy already. He goes out, he gets the Falcons management to spend all these millions of dollars getting Bobby Hebert. Well, fine. Now what he's purchased is a quarterback controversy. Wade Wilson knew his role last year. He knew he was the backup, and when it was time for him to play, he played well. They somehow lose him. They go out and they just inherit, I think, another distraction to go along with people like Andre Rison, who before the first game goes out and tackles his date in a Kroger store and then takes a gun out that he has no license for and goes shooting it in the air.
She was dissing him, man. Okay.
So, and then there's no discipline. Then he was out there playing the next game.
Well, he was on probation until it came to court. So.
Right.
There you go.
They should not have let him play. You need to have discipline. You need to let those players know who's in charge.
That's an important point right there, that he allowed the team to see that you could do anything and still play because you're an important player. The best and most successful coaches will draw the line there and go, I don't care if you're all-world, you're not playing in this game since you got arrested and tarnished the image of the team. But Glanville's tarnishing the image of the team on a daily basis, so that's what, what difference does firing a gun into a Kroger mean? It just doesn't matter.
Well, you've given a prediction of 6-10. What is your prediction for the year?
It depends on whether they change coaches or not.
Okay, if
okay,
they
but
don't
yeah,
change
6-10 sounds pretty accurate. Although, see, what happens if you're losing at the end, you may lose more than that. They may finish 4-12 or 5-11 because the games just don't mean anything after the halfway point.
Okay, so speaking of players that get to do anything that they want, what do you think about the whole Emmitt Smith situation?
Well, personally, if I were Dallas, I would go ahead with the assumption that he's not going to be here. I think Dallas has a pretty good rookie running back in Derek Lassick, but I thought the key to the Cowboys last year was their defense. I thought their defense was what went out there and helped them win football games.
Yeah, Wannstedt not being there is more important than Emmitt not being there.
I agree with that.
I think you can plug in a player, but they allowed it to affect their team. They should have drew the line and said Emmitt doesn't want to play. He's a money-grubbing, greedy person, and he's not going to be here, so let's move on. But they didn't. They kept saying, hey, we might get him back. Okay, sorry.
Okay, well, he's spending $80,000 a week, so not being in the game. But we have to wrap it up, and I'd like to thank you both.
It was fun.
Yes, and we'll see you next Tuesday. And until then, thanks a lot for watching.